Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about the one of the important example called enumerations here. Okay, so using this particular enum, we created the one of the enum type, something like answer. So using this particular constants here, basically whatever we are creating here, no, s, never, something like these are all we are going to call it as a constants. Once we declare this, we are not going to modify this here. So it's like a constant information. For the same resource, like we are going to reusable multiple times. So in that case, we can go for this particular enum, and we'll try to create this is the enum. So another enum we created here, something like level. Observe carefully. Yeah, declaring low, medium, and these are all the three constants we declare. And along with these three constants, we come up with a variable declaration. This is the constructor, and this is the method. So this is the default constructor. So this is the way of creating the enumerations here. Okay, this is one of the important concept we are discussing here. Okay, now what you need to understand here, what you need to understand in the today's session, we'll discuss another important concept called annotations. So how we are going to create annotation. The annotations will try to come up with one of the another important concept here. So let me create a package first. This is the annotation package I'm going to create. Inside this particular annotation package, we are going to write the examples here. Okay, so as I suggested, this is the another important feature. It is introduced from the 1.5 onwards here. Getting the point. Now what we will do, we are going to create we are going to provide the annotation information here. So annotation information is nothing but we'll try to create the different type here. So far we discussed about the interface and the class and enum. Same way, with help of this particular like another type, we are going to create a annotation. For example, so if you observe, this is the annotation I'm going to create. The name of the annotation we are having, my annotation. Okay, so using this particular my annotation, now what I'm doing it, I'm going to provide the information. So you can see, so target and retention we'll discuss later. Now observe carefully how I'm trying to providing this particular, how I'm trying to providing this particular annotations here. Okay, so this is the different type we are using, something like my, like at the rate interface. This is the name of the annotation name here. Okay, so this is the name of the particular annotation name we created. So what exactly it will do? So here we are going to define the two parameters here. String is a one parameter, and str, string is a return type, str is a one method. Same way, int is a return type, and value is a method. Okay, now what I'm doing here, using this particular interface here, getting the point. So what I will do here, I'm going to provide this particular interface on top of the class, or on top of the method, or on top of the something like field, wherever we are interested to create this particular interfaces here. Okay, now the simple example, first what you need to notice here, at the rate here, at the rate interface is a different type here. So interface is different, at the rate interface is different. So only the at the rate interface we are going to use for this particular annotation creations. Okay, annotation case. And here the annotation basically it is created based on the mechanism called interfaces, because inside the interface we'll declare the method like this. Inside the interfaces also we'll declare the method like this. It's like a abstract method. It does not contain the method body. Same way, now what I'm doing here, so inside this particular at the rate interface also I'm defining the same interface methods how we define here. But what we are going to write, but whenever we are trying to use this particular annotation, we are not going to inject, like we are not going to override this particular methods here. Okay, we are not going to override this particular method. This is one of the important example we need to understand. But what happens internally, we are not going to override the body. So however, if you are not interested to provide this particular body of these methods, so Java implement these particular methods. At runtime, Java will implement this particular methods. And so right now, this particular method, it's going to act as a variable names. This methods is going to act as a variable name whenever we are trying to use this particular interface here. Now, what we need to understand, whatever the annotation we created by default, this annotation is extended from the one of the important class here. So this is nothing but this is the class. Sorry, it is a interface here. Okay, so using this particular interface internally, it will extend. So now you can see the public interface annotation, and this interface contain equals method, hash code method, toString method, and annotation type. Now if you see, if you are trying to write anything, any class internally, it is trying to extend with this particular annotation. So this concept we'll call it as a generic concept. Okay, so we'll discuss later this generic concept here, but what you need to understand, any annotation, whatever the annotation we are going to create, by default, it will extend from the this particular annotation, this particular annotations. Okay, so and you can override the all the informations like hash code, toString, annotation type. If you see right now, we don't have any information here. Okay, so if I'm going to write annotation type, what happens internally? So basically, we need to provide this annotation type. Okay, we need to provide this particular annotation type. So instead of writing this, now what I will provide the information. So first we'll use this annotation. How this particular annotation is going to use. Okay, this annotation is going to use on top of the fields, classes, method, parameters, okay, interfaces, wherever we are required. So I will explain the in the which scenario we can use this particular interfaces. Now I'm going to provide the retention here. This is the one of the important annotation we are discussing, something like retention. So the retention basically it will give you the information about the from where we want to access, from where we want to access this information. So we are able to see three informations here. We are able to see this particular three information. What are the three information we are able to see? First one class, second one is runtime, third one is source. So whenever I'm making these three, so you will observe carefully. If I'm going to click on this particular source, you will understand the annotations are to be discarded by the compiler. Okay, so this annotation we are going to use only for the compilation phase. For the compilation phase. Now you can read this class. What happening internally? The annotations are to be recorded in the class file by the compiler, and but need not to be retained by the VM. So virtual machine at runtime. Okay. So this is the default behavior. If you are not providing anything, the class is the default behavior. So it will try to available compile time, and it will available in the dot class files as well, but it will not available at runtime. So only compile time it is available. Compile time with it will available inside the dot class file, and this is the runtime. This is the runtime we need to understand very carefully. So whatever we are discussing here, we need to understand at runtime. This is the another important concept we are discussing here. Okay, so how we can write this particular runtime here. Now you can read this. Annotations are to be recorded in the class file by the compiler, and it will try to return by the runtime also. Okay, so it's going to be reflected in all the locations here. So it's going to be reflected in all the locations here. This is one of the important we need to understand here. So this is one of the important information we need to understand here, how this particular section is working internally. getting the point. So 1 second. Okay, so now you can see this annotation is reflected in a source as well as in the runtime also. This is another important information we need to understand here. Okay, now what I'm doing here inside this particular my annotation, so I'm making only source. So it is available only compile time here. And another important information what we need to understand here, and another important information what we need to understand, you can see the retention policy we identified. So we'll try to add this particular method section. Okay, now observe carefully. This is the annotation we created. Now I'm going to create a one class here. Now I'm going to create a one class, and this particular class will contain the annotation information. Annotation example I'm going to use. And this annotation example, what we need to use here, public static void, the method I'm trying to create as a, okay, so public static void. Now what we need to understand here, I'm going to provide the method name. So what is the method name I'm trying to provide? Something like, so whatever the method we earlier used this particular my method. Now on top of this particular method, I'm trying to use as a our annotation something like my annotation. So my annotation now it is giving me an error. So why it is giving me an error? Because it is expecting two parameters. What are the two parameters? First one is str. So something like I'm going to write annotation example, and second one is value. This particular value I'm going to provide as a 10. Now observe carefully what you need to understand. So inside this particular my annotation, we provided the two methods basically. So what are the two methods we provided here? Now if you observe, this is the my annotation. First one is str, second one is val I provided. Okay, whenever I'm providing this particular two method, but when we are trying to use the annotation on top of the method, what happening internally? This is working as a field here. It is trying to work as a variable. Variable name is equals to something the message we are providing. Same way, the variable name is equals to something like value we are providing here. Okay, but internally, these are all the methods basically. Okay, whenever we are defining the annotation, so we are going to write the method definitions here, and the methods are going to implement it at runtime, and to share the values to the particular method, we'll write like this. Okay, any annotations we are going to define like this. Okay, this is the important. Now what I'm doing is, I'm going to find out the value, whether this particular value, whatever we provided here, the values basically it will reflected or not into our method. Getting the point? So we are using the annotation. We are using this particular annotation. Now we provided the value. So once we provided this particular value, what we need to understand here, basically, we need to understand the values, how we can access it. To access these particular values, now I'm creating an object, annotation example, something like example I'm creating, and a new annotation example. So this is the important example we are discussing, something like annotation example, example dot. Okay, example dot. I'm calling this particular get class here. Whenever I'm calling this particular get class, it is returning class information. Okay, so after getting this particular class one, now what I'm doing it? So observe carefully, class one dot. I'm trying to call the get method. Okay, get method. So here now you can see get method. We can provide this particular name of the method and parameter. If the method is expecting any parameter, we can provide the parameter types. And here in our example, it is not providing any parameter. So the parameter should be empty. And what is the name of the method? What is the name of the method? Something like this is the name of the method I'm having. So where we define this particular name of the method? Here we define here. So my math method. Okay. So what exactly it is doing? We are using the custom annotation what we created, and we provided the two values. These two values we are going to load using this particular code. Whatever the code I'm writing here, this particular code, it is useful to load the values whatever we added here. It is useful to load the values whatever we added here. Okay. Now I'm going to make this particular parameter as a null here. Okay, now observe here, I'm getting an exception here. I'm getting an exception. So why I'm getting an exception? Basically, this is a no such method exception, and if the method is no longer available, we'll get this particular exception. We already identified this particular exceptions here. Now, what I will do, I'm going to use this particular exceptions information. So this particular try, I will write from the beginning onward. I will write from the beginning onward here. So I'm going to format the code. Now you can see the code was formatted, and what we need to understand, this is the method. If the method is no longer available, so this particular exception is going to trigger. Okay, so we discussed in the last session, try with the resource. This particular section we'll call it as a try with the resource here. Okay, so this is the important example we discussed in the last example. Finally, we are creating the method information. Now, once we create this particular method information, now what we can understand here, we need to write the method here. Method m is equals to class one dot get method. Now, so method is coming from the where? It is trying to coming from the java dot lang dot reflect. Okay, this is the method return type here. Now we load the method. So once we load the method dot get annotations we are going to call. Get annotation. Now whenever we are passing this particular annotation, now what happens internally? Whatever the annotation we used here, the particular annotation we are going to call here. Okay, so whatever the annotation we used here, the particular annotation I'm returning. This is the my annotation object here, and using this, now what I'm doing here, using this particular my annotation, something like annotation dot. So str I'm calling. Okay, annotation dot value I'm going to call. Now I'm trying to print this example. Now if you observe carefully, so it does not contain the main type here. Now we'll create a main type. So inside this particular main method, now I'm going to call my math method. Okay. Now you can observe carefully what happened internally. I'm getting null pointer exception I'm getting. So where I'm getting the null pointer exception? At line number 13. So line number 13, why we are getting the null pointer exception? So it is because of whatever the annotation we are using here, the annotation we are getting as a null. Why we are getting the null? Maybe we need to debug the code here. Okay, this is important, we need to understand here. So now you can see finally here we are creating an object called this annotation example. After creating an example, I'm trying to load the class. So which class I'm trying to load? Whatever the current class. From the class, I'm trying to call this particular get method, and the my name of the method I provided as the same as this. Let me run this example in the debug code so that we can easily understand what happening internally. Now I'm loading the class object. So class is loaded here. Okay. So this particular class is loaded. Now you can see annotation example. Okay, the name of the class we are having annotation example. So this is the package name and all the module information we are going to get. Now finally we are getting or not method. So we are getting, let me expand this. Where we are having this particular class, so it's coming, class is coming. This is we are getting as a null. Whatever the annotation we are providing, the annotation we are getting as a null. Okay, so on top of this particular method, it is trying to return as a null here. The annotation we are getting as a null, because of the null, the line number 13, we are getting a null pointer exception. Okay, so this is the way of getting the null pointer exception. Now, what we need to understand here? What we need to understand? So how we can handle this scenario? Let me stop this example. Now I'll go to this annotation. Instead of this particular retention policy, so I will use target, where we want to use this particular annotation. Okay, so I want to use a method. I'm using this annotation on top of the method. Now we'll run the same example. Now you can see, again I'm running the same example. We'll see the annotation. We are getting, oh, not. So why we are not getting this annotation? Anything we are missing? I think the null of the last argument string does not exactly the average class to this. So still we are getting the null. Basically, because of this my annotation, we are getting the null. Why, what happening? Okay, no such method error we are getting. This method is not taking any parameter. Oh. So disconnected got, I was expecting virtual machine invoking the method. Right, getting the null pointer, because the get annotation, it is trying to return the null. Because of this particular annotation, we are getting an information null here. So C dot Anything is it is because of this? No. My METH. Okay. So same method I'm providing here. Nothing. My annotation. So 07 annotation, my annotation. Okay, here only we created the my annotation. So what happening here? Why it is throwing an error? Example dot get class, everything we are getting. Now, what happens if I'm going to pause? So still I'm getting null. No, it will not work. Okay, so this we need to convert basically. Okay. Let me try with another example. So why it is throwing an error here? And here, okay, so annotations are not loading here. Okay, so maybe whatever the annotation we provided, this is not loading here. Something, okay, we provided source. Oh, got it. Because of this, it is not working. Because of those source, it is not working here. Sorry. Now you can see, so annotation example 10. So I missed here the particular retention type I did not modify here. Earlier, it is only the source. So source basically only compile time if it is available. Runtime, it will not available here. But this particular code, it is going to execute runtime only. Get in the point. So this is one of the important I missed here. So because of the particular retention type, this particular example, it is not work here. But now it is working here. Now it is working. So what we are doing basically, we are creating a one annotation object, and from the annotation object we are loading the current class. Current class is nothing but this particular class we are loading, and from the class we are loading the method. Which method we are loading? This is the method we are loading. From this particular method we are loading the annotation. So where we define the annotation? This is the annotation we define, and using this particular code we are printing the annotation value as well as the string inside this particular annotation, whatever the string we provided, and this particular value. Now you can see annotation example where we provided, here we provided on top of the method, and this particular 10 we provided here. Okay, this is the way of writing the annotation example. This is very important example we are discussing, because in the real-time example we are going to write multiple annotations here. But this is the syntax to create a annotation. So this is the same public @interface my annotation. So string str and int value based on our requirement we can provide the parameters here. Okay, so any questions regarding this particular basic example, the annotation example what we are discussing here?
అన్నోటేషన్ అంటే ఏంటి సార్?
సో అనోటేషన్ ఏంటంటే బేసిక్గా డైనమికల్గా మనం వాల్యూస్ ప్రొవైడ్ చేస్తున్నాం. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఈ మెథడ్కి పారామీటర్స్ ఉన్నాయి. సో ఇక్కడ స్ట్రింగ్, సో ఎంఎస్డి అండ్ ఇంటూ వాల్యూ. ఇప్పుడు ఈ మెథడ్కి 2 పారామీటర్స్ ఉన్నాయి. ఈ 2 పారామీటర్ని మనం ఏం చేస్తామంటే బేసిక్గా ఈ క్లాస్, ఈ నేమ్ ఆఫ్ ద క్లాస్ బేస్ చేసుకొని ఈ మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేసేటప్పుడు ఈ 2 వాల్యూస్ ఇస్తాం, స్ట్రింగ్ మెసేజ్ అండ్ ఇంట్ వాల్యూ. కానీ ఇక్కడ ఏం చేస్తున్నామంటే, సో ఎప్పుడైతే మెథడ్ డిక్లేర్ చేస్తున్నామో, సో దిస్ పర్టిక్యులర్ మెథడ్ నా వాట్ హ్యాపెనింగ్ ఇంటర్నలీ, whenever we are calling this particular method we are passing the value. బట్ ఇక్కడ ఏం చేస్తున్నామంటే annotation on top of the method type, on top of the method we are defining this particular annotation to provide the dynamic values. సో ఎప్పుడైతే ఈ మెథడ్ని మనం డిఫైన్ చేస్తామో బేస్డ్ ఆన్ అవర్ రిక్వైర్మెంట్ ఈ వాల్యూస్ మనం ప్రొవైడ్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. ఓకే, ఫస్ట్ పారామీటర్ స్ట్రింగ్ ని ప్రొవైడ్ చేశాను, సెకండ్ పారామీటర్ వాల్యూ ఇక్కడ ప్రొవైడ్ చేశాను. బట్ ఇక్కడ ఏంటంటే నేను ఇక్కడ ఏం కాల్ చేయలేదు ఇక్కడ. సో ఈ మెథడ్ నేను ఎక్కడి నుంచి కాల్ చేయట్లేదు, జస్ట్ డిక్లేర్ చేశాను, నేను వాల్యూస్ ఇచ్చాను ఇక్కడ. ఓకే, సో ఇంకొక ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఏంటంటే వ్యాలిడేషన్ పర్పస్గా ఉంటాయి. ఓకే, ఎగ్జాంపుల్ వ్యాలిడేషన్ పర్పస్గా ఉంటాయి. వ్యాలిడేషన్ పర్పస్గా అంటే ఒక యూజర్ నేమ్ ఉంది, యూజర్ నేమ్కి నేను కొన్ని ఫీల్డ్స్ ఇవ్వాలి, అంటే నాకు 6 to 10 క్యారెక్టర్స్ ఇవ్వాలి. సో 10 తర్వాత 11 క్యారెక్టర్ నేను ఎంటర్ చేస్తే నాకు త్రూ అయిపోవాలి, వ్యాలిడేషన్ అనేది త్రూ అయిపోవాలి. అది ఎలా డిఫైన్ చేస్తామంటే ఇలాగే ఒక అనోటేషన్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తాము. సో దానికి కొన్ని కండిషన్స్ రాస్తాము. ఎప్పుడైతే మనం మెథడ్ రాసుకున్నామో ఇక్కడ ఈ మెథడ్ సేమ్గా అక్కడ ఆ కండిషన్ రాసుకుంటాము. కండిషన్ రాసుకొని క్యారెక్టర్ ఆ ఇన్పుట్ ఆ యూజర్ నేమ్కి 6 to 10 క్యారెక్టర్స్ ఉన్నాయా, ఎక్కువ క్యారెక్టర్స్ ఉన్నాయా చెక్ చేసుకొని దాన్ని బేస్ చేసుకొని ఒక వ్యాలిడేషన్ త్రో చేస్తాము. ఓకే, ఆ వ్యాలిడేషన్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మనం స్ప్రింగ్లో డిస్కస్ చేసుకుందాం. కానీ ఇక్కడ ఏంటంటే బాగా అబ్జర్వ్ చేసేది ఈ అనోటేషన్ మెథడ్ లెవెల్లో, పారామీటర్ లెవెల్లో, కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ లెవెల్లో, ఓకే, వేరియబుల్ లెవెల్లో మనం డిఫైన్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. నాట్ ఓన్లీ దిస్, we can define class level also, class level, interface, enum level. Okay, so we can define this particular annotation, we can provide the values here. If you are not interested to provide the values, so no need to write any parameters here, any parameters, whatever the parameters we are defining. ఇక్కడ ఏంటంటే బేసిక్గా డైనమికల్గా ఏవైతే మనం వాల్యూస్ ప్రొవైడ్ చేయాలనుకుంటున్నామో ఇక్కడ మనం మెథడ్ డిఫైన్ చేస్తాము. ఈ మెథడ్ str అండ్ వాల్ మెథడ్స్ ఉన్నాయి కదా, రన్ టైమ్గా ఈ మెథడ్స్ ఓవర్ రైడ్ అవుతాయి. ఇక్కడ ఏదైతే వాల్యూస్ ఇచ్చామో మనం వాల్యూస్ ఇచ్చామో ఆ వాల్యూస్ ఆ మెథడ్లో స్టోర్ అవుతాయి. ఓకే, ఈ మెథడ్లో ఆ వాల్యూస్ స్టోర్ అవుతాయి. ఇలా డైనమికల్గా వాల్యూస్ ప్రొవైడ్ చేస్తానికి ఈ అనోటేషన్స్ వాడతాం. ఇంకేమైనా క్వశ్చన్సా?
స్ట్రింగ్ సంబంధించిందా సార్ అన్నోటేషన్ అంటే?
సో ప్రస్తుతానికి ఇది స్ట్రింగ్ కాదు, జావాలోనే డిస్కస్ చేసుకుంటున్నాం.
స్ట్రింగ్ మెసేజ్ ఇంటూ వాల్యూ అది ఇవ్వకపోతే డైరెక్ట్గా
ఇది ఒక ఎగ్జాంపుల్ చెప్పాను నేను. ఈ మెథడ్ ఎప్పుడైతే ఈ మెథడ్ ఇక్కడి నుంచి కాల్ చేస్తున్నామో ఇక్కడ మనం ఏం చేస్తాం, పారామీటర్స్ ప్రొవైడ్ చేస్తున్నాం కదా. ఇక్కడ ఈ మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేయాలంటే ప్రస్తుతాన్ని ఇలా పారామీటర్స్ పాస్ చేయాలి. సో ఒకటి పాస్ అని, ఇంకోటి సంథింగ్ 25 అని. ఇప్పుడు నాకు ఎర్రర్ అనేది వెళ్ళిపోయింది. ఎందుకు వెళ్ళిపోయింది అంటే బేసిక్గా ఇక్కడ చూస్తే ఇక్కడ నేను 2 పారామీటర్స్ ఉన్నాయి. ఓకే, ఈ 2 పారామీటర్లకి నేను ఇక్కడ వాల్యూస్ ఇచ్చాను. సో ఇది మన రిక్వైర్మెంట్ ఇది. సేమ్ వే ఇప్పుడు నాకు ఇక్కడ అవసరమే లేదు, ఇంక ఈ మెథడ్కి నేను ఇక్కడ ఏం ప్రొవైడ్ చేయను. సో అనటేషన్ వాడుకుంటాను. అనటేషన్ ద్వారా ఎప్పుడు ఎక్కడ ఏ లొకేషన్స్లోనైనా వాడుకోవచ్చు మనం. ఇప్పుడు ఈ అనటేషన్ని నాట్ ఓన్లీ దిస్ పర్టికులర్ మెథడ్, బేస్డ్ ఆన్ అవర్ రిక్వైర్మెంట్ వీ కెన్ లైక్ చేంజ్ ఇన్ ద డిఫరెంట్ లొకేషన్. సో నేను ఇప్పుడు ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తాను. ఇక్కడ చూస్తే మై అనటేషన్లో సో రిటెన్షన్ టైప్ మెథడ్ ఇచ్చా. నా యూ కెన్ సి ఎలిమెంట్ టైప్. We can go for the class interface and enum declarations. The annotation we can go for the class enum and interfaces. Field declaration including the enum constants. Variable declaration. So whenever I'm making field, we can go for the on top of the variable. So method declaration. So I'm using right now method. And later we can go for the parameter. On top of the formal parameters we can use constructor. On top of the constructor we can go for it. And local variable. If I want to use within the scope of this particular local variable, we can use. So annotation type. If I want to provide this annotation, we can use another annotations here. And we can go for the package declaration. So type parameter. What kind of the type we are going to use? This is the another type we are using here. Okay, finally, module. Finally, we are discussing about the module. These are all the different locations we can use the whatever the custom annotations we are going to use. Okay, so observe carefully. Now in that simple example, simple example where we are using on top of this particular method. On top of this particular method we are using it. Okay, now whenever we are defining this particular annotation, we can go for the different locations wherever we require. So this is the benefit we are going to get from the particular annotation. Now another benefit what we need to understand. So we are going to provide based on our requirement, we can modify the value. Okay, based on our requirement we can modify this particular values here. This is the another important example. So basically, this is basically it is going to provide some additional information here. Okay, along with this particular parameter, if I want to provide any additional information, we can define this particular annotation we are going to provide. But here this purpose is different. But now what I will do in the spring, we'll discuss more about this particular annotations. We are having lot of annotations here. Okay, so basically it will not change the action of the current program. Whenever I'm adding this particular annotation, it is not going to change the action of this particular current program. So if I'm not adding also, it will not change the current program. But here we are not going to print any information. So no such method we are getting. So why I'm getting this particular exception? Because internally we are trying to load the annotation. So right now we don't have any annotation. So I commented on this particular annotation. Because of this, I'm getting this particular error. Now you can see 12. Line number 12, I'm getting an error. Okay. Now you can see if I'm trying to remove this particular values, the method will work as it is. For example, now you can see here I can provide string.class. Enter.class. Now if I'm going to run this, now I'm not getting any values. Because we don't have annotations. Whatever the annotation we used here, I commented here. So now what you understand here? So it is not stopping any example. Even if I'm not using this particular annotation, it is not stopping it. If I'm trying to add, so just it will give you the additional information. Just it is giving the additional information regarding our applications here. Now you can see, so whenever I'm running, I'm getting any value. If I'm not adding this particular annotation, nothing is happening. It is not throwing any exception, and it is not returning any different values when we are adding the annotation and whenever I'm not adding the values here. Okay, but only what we need to understand basically. So when we are trying to use this particular annotations, so internally it will try to provide the supplementary information about the program. Okay, what kind of the supplementation information it is going to provide? What kind of the supplementation here? Basically, right now we are not discussing much information, but so just to get the basic information about this particular annotations, how we can use, what is a different types we can go for it. But in the Spring, we'll identify with a different example we are going to discuss here. Each annotations is going to do the different operations here. But here, how we are going to different annotation we are discussing here, and in the Spring, the purpose of this each annotation we are going to discuss later. Getting the point? But now just understanding it, what kind of the annotation we can create and how we can define the methods inside the annotation. If you're not interested to define the custom values, we can go for this particular default here. So what is the default value I can provide? Something like here. Okay, this is the default keyword we are going to use. Something like default message we can provide. And here you can provide default value something like 100. Okay, default value I'm providing 100, and this is the default message for this particular string. Now here, if I'm going to run this particular example, again we are getting annotation example 10. For example, if I'm not adding anything, this section I'm going to remove. Whenever I'm trying to remove this particular section, now you can see, so this is the default message and 100 we are getting. Default message and 100, where we define this. So here we define the information, default message and the default value we are getting as 100. Now this is basically, it is giving the additional benefits here. So additional benefits to this particular current program here. Okay, so but right now just focus on the more information about the how this particular annotation we can create internally. So what kind of the annotations we can create. Okay, the purpose of this particular annotations we'll discuss later here, because at the time of this we could not understand how this particular annotations are going to work internally. Okay, how this particular annotations are going to work internally. Okay, now come back to here, the 10 to, what is the question you asked earlier? 10 to 17. So to find out this particular 10 to 17, what we are doing is, basically I want to load this particular method. So what is the method we define? Something like my meth. Okay, so my method I defined here, line number 8. I want to I want to load this particular method, because this particular method, it is containing the value. It is containing this particular annotation information. So if I want to load this particular method, now what I'm doing it, first I want to create an object this. First I want to create an object, because inside the class only this particular method is available. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm creating an object. So once I'm creating an object, with help of this particular object, directly I cannot call. See, calling is different, loading an object is different. So here we are calling the object. Okay, line number 28, we are calling an object. But here, line number 12, I'm loading an object here. So because this object I'm loading, once object I'm loading, I will get the object like this particular method information here. Okay, I'm getting method information, but here method we are calling with some values here. So based on this particular values, we are going to perform some operations. But here now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to load the method object here. What is the method object I'm loading? This is the method object. Whenever I'm loading this particular method object, now we can access this annotation. But whenever I'm calling this particular method, we cannot access this particular annotation. So see the information here. We are calling the method here. So line number 28, we are calling this my method. Okay, just we are calling. And from where it is called? Here it is called. Okay, and once it is called here, we'll try to perform the operation on this particular variables here. So string message and into value. String message and into value, we are trying to performing this particular values. Now finally, what we need to understand here? Finally, what we need to understand here? So calling and call is different here. Loading an object is different, because using this particular call, we cannot load this. But using this particular method, we can load this. So using this particular method, we can load this particular information here. Okay. So now observe carefully how we are trying to load this particular example. Okay, how we are trying to load this particular example. So here we are trying to creating the method. After creating this particular method, I'm loading this particular annotations here, and this is the type of annotation. It will try to load multiple annotations. So finally, I'm trying to repeating one by one. So I'm converting into my annotation, because this type is a annotation. So I explain here, if I'm trying to create any custom annotations explicitly, it is extending from this particular annotation. Annotation is basically, it is a interface. So just now we discussed this particular interface here. So it will try to extend from this particular interface here. And later, now what I'm doing here, I'm creating this particular condition. And this is all about the printing the value. This is all about the printing the value. So why can't we load this annotation from this particular my method? Because so this my method, it will not return the method object. It will not return the method object. Okay, this is important information we need to understand here. This is the important information we need to understand here. Now, is it clear or any questions? Okay, so is it clear? Anyone having any questions here?
So 21 to 23, sir.
సో 21 to 23 బేసిక్ ఇక్కడ ఏం చేసామంటే, ఈడొక మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను. సో నువ్వు ఇక్కడ ప్రొవైడ్ చేసిన మెథడ్ బై మిస్టేక్లీ క్లాస్లో లేదనుకో, అప్పుడు ఏమైందంటే ఎక్సెప్షన్ త్రో చేస్తుంది. సో కేర్ఫుల్గా ఇక్కడ చూస్తే ఈ మెథడ్ ఇక్కడ త్రోస్ 2 ఎక్సెప్షన్స్. నో సచ్ మెథడ్ ఎక్సెప్షన్, సెక్యూరిటీ ఎక్సెప్షన్. Okay, so here we are trying to throw exception. You can see throw new no such method exception. This is we discuss whenever we are trying to discussing the exception handling concept here. So whenever we are trying to throw this particular exception, we need to handle this. We need to handle this exception. How we are handling? Using this particular try and catch block, we are handling this particular exception here. Okay, we are handling this particular exception using try and catch block. It's a simple one. If you understand the exception handling example, you can easily understand. So why I'm using this try and catch block here? Why I'm using the try and catch block here? So another one, 39 to 14. 39 to 14 basically M. M is a object of this particular method. So M is the object of this particular method. Now I'm calling get annotation. So whenever we are calling this particular annotation, so on top of the, basically this M is a reference variable of this particular method. Okay, M is a reference variable of this particular method. So which method object right now we are accessing? This method, my method. Okay, we are trying to access the my method object. Whenever we are accessing this particular my method object here, now what you need to understand here, so on top of this particular method, if you are having any annotations, those annotations is going to return by this particular get annotation method. Getting the point? So if we don't have anything, this annotation will be written null. For example, I'm going to make same the line number 10 as a debug breakpoint here. Now I'm running in the debug mode. So observe carefully, object, class object we are creating. From the class, we are trying to load the current class object. And from the current class, I'm trying to load the method. Okay, sorry, I selected wrong one. Now we'll run one more time here. Now you can see method we are loading. Once we load this particular method, now you can read this. So what is the name of the method we are loading? This is the my method. Okay, this is the my method we are loading. It is expecting two parameters, string comma int parameters. Okay, this is the public static void, and it is coming from inside this particular com.07 annotation package name. Annotation example is the class name, and my method is the method name. Okay, now if you see, this is the package name and class name and method name. This is the path we are having recording this particular method. Okay, after loading this particular annotation, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to load this particular annotations like so what is the annotation we are having right now? Right now, what is the annotation we are having? So now you can see interface com.07 annotation dot my annotation. Where we provided this particular my annotation? Line number 7. How we are loading? With help of this particular method dot get annotation. Now if you see this, so it is doing internally, this is the way of it's trying to load the object, whatever the annotation we are trying to create. Whatever the object we created, it is trying to create this. Okay, so this is one of the important example we are discussing. Using this particular annotation example, we are loading this particular my annotation example. Now, what we need to understand here, okay, so we are loading the annotation. After this particular annotation, so here we are checking whatever the annotation we are loading, this is the type of this particular my annotation. Now, if it is yes, because it is a conditional we define. If it is returning true, we are trying to converting into this, and we are loading the all the values here. Okay, these are all the default message what we added. Now it is trying to return. So only one annotation we are using. So so the annotation is printing here. Okay, so is it clear or any questions? Is it clear or any questions? Okay, this is the one of the important example we are discussing regarding this particular annotation. So tomorrow we'll continue some more basic example on this particular annotation. And once we familiar with this particular annotation, we'll move on to the another important example called generic concept here. Okay, so we'll continue tomorrow. Sorry, we'll try to continue today evening. We'll discuss about the another important concept to call the same continuation with the annotation. Okay, once we complete it, we'll move on to the another important concept to call generic concepts here. Okay, yeah, so we'll continue today evening, same time, 8 p.m. we are going to connect here.